All right, let's dive straight into the heart of rock and roll's metamorphosis. Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band wasn't just an album, it was a gateway to a whole new dimension. I remember thinking, we're either going to lift music to a new plane or crash spectacularly. So, what's your take? Did we hit the stratosphere or what?
It did more than hit the stratosphere. It broke through to the other side, man. You took rock and turned it inside out, setting the stage for the rest of us to experiment. Without Sgt. Pepper, Nirvana's Nevermind might have just been another drop in the ocean.
Absolutely. It was a work of art that removed the barriers not just in music, but in the very way we perceive it. You turned the album into a canvas, a medium for storytelling that transcends audio. It was a liberation, allowing artists like me to paint our sounds in bolder, more complex strokes.
Oh, darling, it was opera, vaudeville, and rock and roll all rolled into one. You made music theatrical, allowing Queen to embrace our extravagant side. Without Sgt. Pepper, who knows? Maybe no Bohemian Rhapsody.
It was like a musical revolution had been bottled up and you guys just popped the cork. Before Sgt. Pepper, rock was one thing. Simple, predictable. Then suddenly, it's like the whole genre got shot with a bolt of lightning.
You know, it wasn't just about the sounds, it was about blowing minds. Electric guitars had been screaming for a while, but that album, it made them speak. It was like a bridge, man, from where rock was to where it could go. You laid the foundation for everything that came after.
Interesting. Hearing all this makes me think we tapped into something, not just musically, but culturally, spiritually even.
And it wasn't just tapping into it, it was kicking down the bloody door. Sgt. Pepper wasn't just music, it was a statement.
Indeed, it was as much about the era it was created in as it was about breaking new ground. The album captured the spirit of the age, becoming a beacon for the cultural revolution.
Yes, but let's not forget the sheer musical mastery. Every track, a different flavor, a different color. It was bold, daring. Music had never tasted quite like that before.
And the raw emotion, man. The album reaches out and grabs you by the soul. It makes you feel things deeply, shows the power of music to touch lives, to change the world.
Exactly. It's all about pushing limits, exploring the unknown. Sgt. Pepper didn't just push the envelope, it launched it into orbit.
Couldn't have put it better myself. It was our shot at immortality, a way to say, this is the Beatles, and we are here to change the game. And judging by this discussion, it seems we might have succeeded at least a bit. All right, let's cut to the chase. Sgt. Pepper wasn't just another album, it tore apart the rulebook. For starters, we decided an album could be more than songs. It was a message.
Yeah, the idea that you could create an entire world within an album, that really spoke to me. It's like what we aimed for with Nevermind. There's a whole atmosphere, a vibe that pulls it all together.
Absolutely. The concept of an alter ego, a band within a band, it was revolutionary. It broke the mold and allowed artists to explore beyond the confines of their established image. Ziggy Stardust wouldn't have existed without Sgt. Pepper.
I must agree, darling. It's that theatricality, the blending of music and story, that really inspired Queen. Bohemian Rhapsody owes a lot to the freedom Sgt. Pepper showcased. The audacity to mix rock and opera, to create a narrative through the album, it's genius.
It was all about breaking free, you know? We were tired of being the mop tops. We wanted to be artists, to make something that mattered.
And you did. You took that first step into a larger world. The way Sgt. Pepper played with sounds and recording techniques, it showed us all what was possible. It was like setting a guitar on fire. You don't just hear it, you feel it.
But it wasn't just about the sound, was it? It was the message. The whole album has this undercurrent of dissent, of questioning society, getting better, and a day in the life. They weren't just songs, they were statements.
Indeed, each track brings its own flavor, its own story. But when pieced together, they create a mosaic that's both enchanting and thought-provoking.
And let's not forget the cover art. That cover was a cultural statement, an introduction to this psychedelic world you were about to enter. It blazed a trail for albums as not just auditory, but visual experiences.
It was like nothing we'd ever seen. You guys didn't just create an album, you created a moment in time that everyone wanted to be part of. Every track, every note, it just hits deep into your soul.
Exactly, Janis. We wanted to create something that spoke to the soul, that made people think and feel. Sgt. Pepper was our canvas, our experiment. It wasn't just music, it was a revolution.
And it inspired a generation to pick up their guitars, to experiment with sounds and lyrics, to say something real.
It was more than music. It was an awakening. You showed us all what was possible if you dared to dream a bit bigger.
To meld art, music, and story into a singular expression, that's the legacy of Sgt. Pepper.
A legacy that continues to inspire, darling. The essence of what it means to be a true artist.
Cheers to that. Sgt. Pepper was our dream, but it turns out it was just the beginning. Let's dive straight into the deep end. The recording techniques and studio innovations of Sgt. Pepper were nothing short of a revolution. We were doing things no one thought possible. Thoughts?
Man, the way you guys used the studio as an instrument itself was wild. It's like you were painting with sound. I've always been about pushing the guitar to its limits, and hearing what you did on Sgt. Pepper made me want to explore even deeper. Those backward guitar solos, the looping, it was all far out.
Absolutely, Jimmy. The landscape of music was forever changed. It emboldened me to experiment with sound and narrative in ways I'd never considered. You turned the studio into a sandbox of creativity, and that mindset influenced how I approached albums like Ziggy Stardust.
Darling, the operatic sections, the harmonies layered upon harmonies, it showed me and the boys in Queen that there were no limits, only those we set for ourselves. Your experimental recording techniques gave us the license to be as grandiose and theatrical as we wanted. Bohemian Rhapsody owes a debt to Sgt. Pepper, no question.
It wasn't just about experimenting for the sake of it. Each technique served the song, the story. We were meticulous, sometimes to the point of madness.
That meticulousness paid off, man. You set a precedent. Suddenly, it wasn't just about laying down tracks, it was about sculpting an audio experience.
And let's not forget the use of non-traditional instruments and studio effects. It wasn't just innovation for innovation's sake. It expanded the vocabulary of rock music. You broke barriers, showing us that the studio could be as much an instrument as a guitar or a piano.
I couldn't agree more. The way each song flowed into the next, it was like a musical journey. Before Sgt. Pepper, who thought to do that in rock, it was opera, it was theater, it was everything but ordinary.
It seems we were all listening, all inspired in some way. The fact that we're still talking about it, still influenced by it, says everything, doesn't it?
Doesn't just say it, man, it screams it. You guys showed us all what could be done, made it impossible to go back to just simple recordings.
Indeed, it was a monumental shift. The possibilities became endless, and the music world was all the better for it.
A masterpiece, darling, in every sense. Not just in sound, but in how it inspired all of us to dream a bit bigger, to dare a bit more.
All right, we're diving headfirst into the psychedelic influence of Sgt. Pepper. This isn't just about the colors and patterns, man. It's deeper. How did this album fuel the psychedelic era, in your eyes?
Man, Sgt. Pepper was like a cosmic burst in the 60s, setting minds on fire. When I played my Strat trying to emulate those sounds, it felt like painting with new colors, ones that hadn't been invented yet. We were all trying to catch that vibe, that freedom.
It's funny you should say that, because at its core, it was about messing with what music could be, pushing it until the boundaries blurred and vanished.
That's the thing. It wasn't just about experimenting for the sake of it. There was something desperate, almost primal, about reaching out and smashing the status quo. Like with Smells Like Teen Spirit, we weren't just playing chords, we were screaming for understanding, using noise as our language.
But don't you think it went beyond just the sound? It was like with Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, you guys weren't just singing a song, you were inviting everyone to tear down the curtains in their minds, look beyond. It's raw emotion pouring out in colors.
It was an invitation to explore, certainly. But what struck me was the combination of theatrics with that exploration. Taking the listener on a journey, not just audibly, but spiritually. Space Oddity was partly inspired by that notion, the idea that music could transport you to another dimension entirely. And it wasn't all peace and love, though that was the dream. The cultural context, the swinging 60s, Vietnam, civil rights, it was all fuel for the fire. Sergeant Pepper had its finger on that pulse.
Exactly, man. It wasn't escapism. It was confrontation dressed in psychedelic garb. Grunge did the same thing, took the pain and the angst and made it art. Made it something people couldn't ignore anymore.
You know, playing at Woodstock, feeling that energy, it was clear. We weren't just playing music, we were casting spells, hoping to change the world one note at a time.
Spells that remain potent. The legacy of Sergeant Pepper isn't just in its immediate impact, but in how it emboldened artists to view the studio as an infinite canvas, to be bold in the face of the mundane.
And let's not forget the message of love that was central to it all. In a world tearing at its seams, that album, Our Music, it was a tether to something pure.
The Sgt. Pepper album cover wasn't just a picture, it was a bloody declaration. It said music can't just be heard, it has to be seen, felt on a whole other level. Let's crack into that. Janis, you were never one to shy away from bold visuals yourself.
You got that right, honey. That cover was like a window into another universe. My albums, my stage presence, hell, even my wardrobe was all about bearing my soul. Sgt. Pepper did that, but in a collective fashion. It wasn't just the Beatles you were looking at, it was their entire cosmic neighborhood.
It's fascinating, really. That cover invited you to examine every detail, to dive into a world where boundaries between music and visual art just vanished. It was transcendent. Like Ziggy Stardust, it wasn't just music or a persona, it was a full-on immersive experience.
Absolutely, darling. It was theatrical, wasn't it? Every inch of that cover tells a story, much like my approach to performing. Every Queen album, every concert, it's a show, it's drama, it's a sensory feast, much like Sgt. Pepper was. They didn't just release an album, they staged an invasion. Man, that cover was far out, like it made you stop and think, what world have I stumbled into? And that's the power of art. You dig, it transports you. When I play my guitar, I don't just want people to hear it. I want them to feel it, see colors, experience it beyond just sound.
That's it, Jimmy? You're speaking my language now. It's all vibration, energy. We're not just creating music, we're creating a vibe, a presence, something you can almost reach out and touch.
But let's not forget the risk they took. That cover could have been a colossal failure, an overindulgent mess. Yet, it was anything but. It challenged us all to push the envelope with our art, to dare to blend mediums, to dare to be different.
Darling, risk is the currency of genius. Without risk, there is no reward. Sgt. Pepper was a gamble that paid off in spades. It made it okay to be extravagant, to be elaborate in our storytelling, not just in music, but in how we present it to the world.
Right, it's about the narrative. And every eye looking at that cover could craft a different story, a personal journey. It's bloody brilliant, because it makes the album a personal experience for everyone, yet it's shared globally.
Ain't that the truth? It's like every look gives you a new perspective, a new angle. It's alive, that cover. It interacts with you.
It transcends the moment. Even today, artists are trying to capture that magic, to blend their music with visual art in a way that speaks on multiple levels. The cover of Sgt. Pepper opened that door.
And we waltzed right through it, darling. How could we not? It was an invitation to innovate, to dream bigger. Yeah, it showed us there's no limit. Music, art, it's all connected. It's all expression, baby.
Exactly. It wasn't just about pushing boundaries, it was about erasing them altogether. Sgt. Pepper told us the sky's the limit, so why not shoot for the stars? Alright, let's dive into how Sgt. Pepper revolutionized rock by embracing sounds from all over the globe. It's not just about the sitar in Within You, Without You. It's the whole idea of music without borders.
It's fascinating, really. Sgt. Pepper opened the floodgates for us in Queen as well. We felt liberated to experiment with everything from opera to funk. Music became this limitless playground. Man, the sitar on that track blew my mind. It was like suddenly there were new colors to paint with, made me experiment more with my own sound, trying to mix in those non-Western influences.
It was all about breaking down barriers, wasn't it? Sgt. Pepper was this canvas where East met West, past met future. We took that as a license to be fearless in our own creations, didn't we? Ziggy Stardust wouldn't have landed on Earth if the Beatles hadn't launched that spaceship first.
And it wasn't just the sounds, you know. The whole vibe of the album told you it's all right to be different, to mix it up. Made a girl like me think it was okay to belt the blues the way I did. They kicked open the door, and all this beautiful, colorful chaos spilled out.
Precisely, darling. The album told a story not just through lyrics, but through its eclectic soundscape. It was a mosaic of musical genres, an invitation to explore. But let's not forget how this all plays into the broader narrative of the 60s, man. Sgt. Pepper wasn't happening in a vacuum. It was responding to and also sparking cultural dialogues. Music was changing. The world was wide open.
True, but it's also about how these sounds influenced us personally as artists. It made me think of my music as more than just sound, but as a space where different cultures can coexist, collide, and create something entirely new.
For sure, but it wasn't just about being experimental for the sake of it. There was soul in it, real emotion. Within you, without you, gets to you. It's haunting. That's the beauty of bringing in those influences, the depth they add.
It's about connection, isn't it? Music, at its core, is this universal language. And with Sgt. Pepper, we were saying, look, we're all speaking the same language, even if it sounds different. It was an invitation to the world. Come join this band. There's room for everyone.
A splendid summary, John. It made the world a bit smaller, a bit more connected. The echoing impact of that choice to integrate and innovate, it's immortal, like the Queen's crown jewels. Guess you could say it was all just one big electric church, bringing people together. That album made the case that music's true home isn't in any one place. It's everywhere.
And that, my friends, is the essence of art, transcending boundaries to touch the universal. Sgt. Pepper didn't just open the door, it took the door off its hinges. Couldn't have put it better myself. It showed us that the possibilities were endless. And we're all proof of that, aren't we? Taking the spirit of that album and pushing even further into new territories. Let's dive into the meat of it then. Sgt. Pepper wasn't just a collection of songs, it was an album, a whole experience. Before us, records were just hits plus filler. We changed the game. Didn't we just make it harder for everyone else? Now every album had to be a Sgt. Pepper.
You're not wrong, John, but at the same time, it liberated us. Before, it was like you'd have this single, and that was it. After Sgt. Pepper, we could tell a story. It wasn't just about the hits anymore. It was about creating an atmosphere, a vibe. It was a whole new canvas.
Exactly, Kurt. And it wasn't just a canvas for music, but for identity, rebellion, for exploring the human condition. Sgt. Pepper wasn't just an album, it was a cultural moment. It made the album the ultimate medium of artistic expression. Before that, who was really paying attention to the album as an art form? It gave birth to the idea that an album could be a singular artistic statement.
Darling, you're onto something. But let's not gloss over the influence it had on the theatricality of music. Sgt. Pepper was as much a performance as it was an album. It was this realization that made so many of us, Queen included, realize the power of performance. Rock wasn't just music. It was opera. It was theater. It was spectacle. And let's not forget the influence it had on AOR, man. Albums became the thing. Radio had to adapt, start playing deeper cuts. Music became more than just background noise. It became an experience. You'd sit down, light up, and let the whole album take you on a journey. Singles? Those were just signposts along the way.
Aye, but at what cost? Suddenly, you weren't worth your salt unless you could churn out this grandiose statement. Did we lose something there? The simplicity of a good song, standing on its own?
Maybe, but isn't evolution about shedding skins? Sgt. Pepper forced us to evolve, to think bigger. Sure, it set a bar, but why fear heights? It pushed us to exceed, to experiment, to dream.
Indeed, it was both a blessing and a curse. It challenged artists to be more, to think of the album not just as a collection of songs, but as an entity. But it's true, not every flight reaches the stars without risk of burning up on re-entry.
Another one bites the dust, though, if you're not willing to take the leap. Sgt. Pepper showed that the risk was worth the reward. Music is about pushing boundaries, after all, right? The essence of rock and roll is to shake up the status quo. Sgt. Pepper wasn't just shaking it, it was setting it on fire.
Yeah, we might have put a bit of pressure on the next bloke in line, but isn't that the point? To inspire, to dare. Sgt. Pepper didn't just speak to our generation, it screamed. Let's get into the meat, the lyrics and narrative of Sgt. Pepper. It's more than just music, it's a mirror showing society itself. A day in the life, that was us laying bare the fragmented reality of modern life. Art should disturb the comfortable and comfort the disturbed. Yeah?
Absolutely, John. She's Leaving Home hit me hard. It's raw, real. We're talking about rebellion, freedom, but also the pain of growing up, of leaving behind what's familiar. It's like tearing open the curtains and showing the world as it is. Music's got to be more than notes and rhythm. It's got to bleed, make you feel something deep down.
The narrative prowess of Sgt. Pepper certainly opened doors. It wasn't just about the individual songs, but how they came together to form a story, an ethos. It's akin to creating a world within a world, which I tried to emulate with Ziggy Stardust. It's that bridge between fantasy and reality. But let's not forget, it's also about the subtlety of social commentary. A Day in the Life didn't just paint a picture, it questioned and prodded, asking, what is real? What are we missing?
It's the operatic aspect, the grandeur of it all that inspired me. Each song a different character, a different scene. Its life in vibrant color, varied yet unified. Sgt. Pepper was fearless in combining styles, narratives. It showed me that music is limitless, bound only by the extent of our imagination.
You all speak of narrative and societal reflection, but for me, it's the authenticity that punches you right in the gut. Sgt. Pepper doesn't just tell a story, it exposes the soul, stripped bare, unapologetic. It's gritty, it's messy, and that's the beauty of it. We tried capturing that raw honesty in our music, not shying away from the darkness or the light.
The way Sgt. Pepper blurred the lines between fantasy and reality, music and message, was revolutionary. It wasn't just about experimenting with sounds, but about challenging perceptions, encouraging the listener to see beyond the surface. Like in Within You, Without You, it's that spiritual awakening through music, man. It's all connected. Music, life, the universe. It compels you to listen, to really listen, not just hear.
Spot on. It's that blend of the personal with the universal. We weren't just making music, we were sketching the times, embedding the essence of the era into melodies and words. It's not always pretty, but it's truthful, and truth, that's the real essence of art. All right, let's dive into the deep end. Sgt. Pepper wasn't just a band, it was a concept. It was personas we created. It allowed us to explore beyond the Beatles. It let us be someone else, stretch creatively. I mean, look around. Ziggy Stardust, anyone? Ziggy was my mask. My way to speak the unspeakable, challenge the norms. Sgt. Pepper's showed us the power of alter egos in music. It's not just about wearing a different coat, it's about shedding your skin, diving into parts of your psyche you didn't know existed. It's liberation.
Absolutely, darling. There's something freeing about stepping into another character. Takes the pressure off, doesn't it? You're not merely a musician, you're a performer, an actor on the stage of life. Sgt. Pepper was groundbreaking in that sense. It showed us the theatrics of music, something Queen took to heart. It's like having the freedom to paint with all the colors of the wind, man. You're not just stuck with blues or rock. You can be anything, from anywhere. That album showed us there's no limit to what music can convey.
Yeah, but it's not just about dressing up or playing pretend. It's deeper than that. It's about the music reflecting the many facets of our soul, man. Sgt. Pepper's was like opening Pandora's box. Suddenly, music wasn't just about love or heartbreak. It was about life, exploration, questioning authority.
Exactly. It was about narrative, storytelling. You could be grandiose, whimsical. It's like being an author of a novel, but each chapter is a song, each character a note.
And it added layers, didn't it? It wasn't just sound, it was performance, identity, and sometimes confusion. You get lost in the persona occasionally, wondering where Freddie ends and Mr. Mercury begins.
That's the double-edged sword, isn't it? On one hand, you've got Sgt. Pepper giving people a new lens to see the Beatles. On the other, there's the risk of becoming the mask you wear. I mean, Look at us. Did we sometimes get lost in our own creations?
That's the crux of it. With Sgt. Pepper, we wanted to push the Beatles into new territory, challenge ourselves and the listener. The personas were a means to an end, but they also became something we had to live up to. Alright, let's dive into how Sgt. Pepper reshaped us and the rock arena. For the Beatles, it was more than an album, it was a revolution on vinyl. It transcended what anyone thought possible in rock. Sgt. Pepper wasn't just music, it was an auditory movie, a soundscape that took you places. It's like what I tried to do with Ziggy Stardust, but the Beatles, they laid down the tracks to run that train.
Oh, absolutely. It dared us to dream bigger, to splash our music with broader strokes. Queen always aimed for the theatrical, but Sgt. Pepper showed us how to fuse it seamlessly with rock. It was operatic, a grand play without a stage, but so vividly imagined. Yeah, man, it broke the rules. Before Sgt. Pepper, who thought to put a sitar next to a rock guitar, it opened doors, showed us the endless possibilities of what could be. Music wasn't just about what you played, but how you thought about it.
It created a space for albums to be more than collections of songs. Sgt. Pepper was a complete experience. That's what I wanted for Nirvana's music, to create something you dive into headfirst, not just listen to, but experience.
Y'all are speaking truths. Before Sgt. Pepper, music felt more confined. This album, it just blew the hinges off what anyone thought an album could be. It wasn't afraid to experiment, to get real deep and personal, or to just plain rock out. It empowered artists to say, yeah, I'm doing this my way.
It marked a shift, not just for us, but for music as a whole. Suddenly, the album became the canvas, and each song a stroke of paint contributing to something larger than just a hit single. Indeed, and it wasn't just the music. It was the whole aesthetic, that idea of creating an alter ego for the band. It gave permission to explore identities, to play roles. Ziggy Stardust owes a bit of his life to Sgt. Pepper in that way.
But let's not forget the genius in its subtlety. Sgt. Pepper could transport you, but it didn't need to scream to do so. It was majestic and yet so intimate. That duality is something I always admired and aspired to with Queen. It was like a kaleidoscope of sounds, man. You dive in and every turn gives you a new color, a new emotion. It didn't just change the way I played. It changed the way I listened to music, the way I experienced it.
It challenged us to think of albums as complete works, not just singles with some filler around them. You weren't skipping songs. You were taking the journey they intended, start to finish.
And it wasn't afraid to tackle real stuff, to get into the nitty-gritty of life, love, and everything in between. Music had power, and Sgt. Pepper used it, let it loose. It wasn't just singing, it was screaming, whispering, and everything in that vast in-between.
Exactly. It was our turning point, a signal flare that things were changing. Sgt. Pepper wasn't just an album, it was a declaration. We weren't the boys on Ed Sullivan anymore. We were artists painting on a wider canvas. Alright, diving into the deep end now. Sgt. Pepper didn't just tickle our fancy, it blasted doors wide open for future generations. Thoughts on its ripple through the ages?
Man, it's like Sgt. Pepper handed us all a license to kill the mundane. My entire approach with Nirvana was about breaking the mold, you know? This album showed us you could be profound without being pretentious. It's not about selling out, it's about telling your story, your way. And if that means screeching over a distorted riff about teenage angst, then so be it.
Absolutely, Kurt. Sgt. Pepper was a harbinger of change. Look at Ziggy Stardust. That entire persona was birthed from the idea that music is more than sound. It's spectacle, it's narrative. We owe that conceptual freedom to the Beatles. They turned the album into a canvas. Without Sgt. Pepper, there would be no Space Oddity, just the void.
Darling, they didn't just open the door, they kicked it down. Queen took the baton with relish. The theatrics, the experimentation, Bohemian Rhapsody is a child of Sgt. Pepper's legacy. It was about pushing boundaries, darling, and proving that a song, an album, could be an operatic symphony, a rock anthem, and a ballad all at once. You guys are spot on. It's like Sgt. Pepper whispered in our ears, "Come on, let your freak flag fly." It wasn't just about the music, it was about liberation. breaking free from the chains of what was expected. Music as a form of rebellion, of exploration. I took that to heart with every string I bent, pushing the sonic possibilities.
I won't pretend we knew the full extent of what we were doing with Sgt. Pepper, but hearing you lot, it's clear we were onto something. Something that echoed beyond our own time. We weren't just recording an album, we were capturing a moment of cultural shift, embedding it in vinyl.
And it's that spirit, that refusal to be boxed in, that's kept Sgt. Pepper alive. It's not nostalgia, it's a fountain of youth for music. Every note, every harmony tells you to challenge the status quo, to reinvent, to revolt.
Quite right. It's a testament to creativity unbound. And its influence, boundless. It showed us the music could be as impactful as literature or cinema in conveying complex themes, in inspiring change. It didn't just shape the future of music, but of culture itself.
Precisely. And let's not forget the visual feast Sgt. Pepper served. It wasn't just about what you heard, it was what you saw, what you felt. It invited us to embrace flamboyance, to make every performance an extravaganza. Man, it taught us music's true potential isn't confined to chords and lyrics. It's an experience, a journey. From the first note to the last echo, it's life itself, full of color, pain, joy, and above all, freedom.
Here. We took a chance with Sgt. Pepper, and if today's discussion is any indicator, that chance paid off in dividends not just for us, but for music as a whole. Revolution wasn't just in the air, it was on our turntables. Let's dive right into the thick of it. Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band slapped the face of musical norms. It's not just a chapter in the Beatles' tale, but a disruption in the rock saga. Opinions, let's have them. Sharp and unfiltered. How has this album twisted your creative arm?
It blew the roof off the sucker, man. Before Sgt. Pepper, we were all playing in someone else's playground. After, it's like we've been handed the keys to the factory. Suddenly, it's okay to paint outside the lines, tell a story. Nirvana's work, it's a direct descendant. We owe them for cracking open the door.
Far out, Kurt. It's the sonic landscape they painted, vast, uncharted. They took the studio and turned it into an instrument itself. Makes a fella think about the magic you can conjure with just a bit of innovation and a whole lot of spirit.
Absolutely, Jimmy. It's the art of possible. They built a world within that album, one where the Ziggy Stardusts of the future could run wild. It's not just about the music, it's the entire persona, the atmosphere. Sgt. Pepper gave us permission to be as extravagant, as different as we dared.
Darling, it's the theatrics for me. The grandeur. Sgt. Pepper wasn't just an album. It was a performance from start to finish. Queen took that to heart. Every concert, every song, a chance to transport our audience to another universe. Without Sgt. Pepper, perhaps our canvas would have been smaller, less vivid.
Y'all are talking about creativity and theatrics, but let's not ignore the soul. That album, it reaches out and grabs you. It's raw, it's real. It tells you it's okay to feel, to be human. It's powerful, man. Made me want to pour every ounce of myself into my music.
Right, each of you touched on something pivotal. Freedom, storytelling, innovation, theatrics, humanity. Sgt. Pepper wasn't just about breaking the mold. It was about smashing it to bits. We weren't just playing music anymore. We were creating experiences, challenging norms, pushing boundaries. And look at us, decades apart in style and substance, yet here we find common ground. It's a testament to the album's lasting impact.
Well, John, I must say, it's all about daring to be different, isn't it? To stand out, to shout from the rooftops. Sgt. Pepper did just that. It shouted in a room that had been too quiet for too long. It's like lighting a fire, man. Once it's lit, it's going to burn, spread, and inspire. That album, it lit a fire under the ass of the music industry.
And it continues to, doesn't it? Every new generation discovers Sgt. Pepper and finds something fresh. It's eternal, a well of inspiration that never runs dry.
It makes you brave, knowing you've got ancestors who weren't afraid to tear down the walls. Makes your own troubles seem smaller, your own fears less significant.
Honey, it's all about connection in the end, connecting with those who came before us, with our audience, with the universe. Sgt. Pepper showed us the power of that connection.
There you have it, the legacy of Sgt. Pepper, as raw and real as it gets. It's not just an album, it's a challenge, A challenge to be bold, to reinvent, to connect, to feel. And as long as music exists, that challenge will keep pushing artists to explore the unknown. Thanks for riding this wave with me. It's been one hell of a trip.